Welcome to Investigative Report into the 1 year anniversary of the repaving of the alleyways. In this episode, we're going to take an up close and personal look at how the alleyways are holding up. Have they met residents' expectations, or is there potentially trouble in paradise? But before we do that, let's take a step back in time and go watch the village board meetings where these issues were discussed prior to the actual repaving of the alleyways. Let's see what the village leadership thought about the issues of repaving them, and then also what type of information we really need to pay close attention to moving forward.
So the mayor made an announcement, every rock alley in the village is gonna get paid by the end of the year. I know we put some resources, ARPA resources for this. I think you responded to the degree that these are gonna be asphalt alleys. My question is, can you kind of quantify the scope of work? What that looks like? Cause I was under the impression, let's say a green alley, for instance, is hundreds of thousands of dollars. Who's doing the math here? We didn't have enough money in ARPA to do all of them. So it's not green alleys, it sounds like we're doing some sort of resurfacing. I did notice we did, the prairie path with asphalt. So is that essentially, I wanna make sure I paint a clear picture for the residents, what they should expect by that. So should they expect their alleys for the residents that have rock alleys, what should they expect the timeline, and then what is that budget? I think I thought it was $1 million in there for like alley streets, etc. Can you break down what the budget is approximately? Like I said, I just wanna make sure the numbers sound right.
So, to put things in proper context, Trustee Jones mentioned a term called ARPA. ARPA stands for American Rescue Plan Act. It basically was an act that was passed during the pandemic to be able to allocate funds to different states to address issues related to the pandemic. Well, now that it's over, certain municipalities like Maywood have been tasked to figure out what to do with those funds. In this particular instance, the village decided to allocate those funds towards repaving the alleyway. So before moving forward, I think it's very important for us to talk about the different type of alleyways. There are three types. I'm going to rank them from least expensive to most expensive. The first type is the asphalt, the kind that we have, the concrete, and then something called a green alleyway. And the significance of a green alleyway and what makes it more expensive is that basically it's supposed to be more natural, it's more labor intensive. It basically uses permeable, which means that water is able to freely flow through it. So, permeable types of brick or pavement that allows water to basically pass through it with minimal obstruction. And you don't usually have to have an actual sewer system attached to it, but some forms of it can have a sewer system. In addition to that, understanding how water flows is very important because with the alleyway, if you don't have proper drainage, you run the likelihood of water accumulating on the actual surface of the alley or next to it and causing the premature breakdown of the actual pavement. And so, this is an example of our asphalt alleyways before and then after the actual repaving. So let's go back to the board meetings and listen to some of the valid concerns that were brought up.
Sure. Last board meeting, the board voted, there was on this agenda, the board voted on $850,000 to repave, I believe it's 63 alleys, in Blacktop.
Okay, so it is gonna be black, so it's gonna look similar to what, the prairie path.
Correct.
Okay, so I don't personally have a alley behind my house, so I don't know, from an engineering perspective, what that looks like. So I think anyone would appreciate their alley being resurfaced. My, question would be, long-term, is this is this a quick fix type thing? Are we just doing it, and is it gonna be, because usually when you do an alley, like you're ripping it up and any other sewage, any of those kind of considerations are being paid or being considered. Is what we're doing considered like a long-term fix, or is this just to kind of put and I'm looking for Frank to answer this, if he doesn't mind, I want to get his thoughts. If if this is like long-term, fix, or is this just a short-term fix, so we can do kind of longer-term, um, or is this considered long-term? I guess we need to make sure I understand our strategy.
And now, like, hearing this thing and listening to the conversation, it most certainly should have came through the infrastructure committee. So we could talk about, okay, so what type of material was being utilized, what exactly are we talking about? Of course, we've been talking about alleys for a long time in the village of Maywood. And, we want to do things quick, but we also want to do things the right way as well. And so for me, if I would have had this additional context, because I'm thinking of the same mindset that these alleys are going to be, we're going to be utilizing material that we have seen, and it's a full, brand new alley. And so really, what we're saying, it most certainly is us just putting the Band-Aid over the alleys. Because you say years, but I don't know what those years look like. It's like 2 years, 3 years. And so when we talk about making an investment in the tune of, $1 million, I know the whole idea is to get it done quick, get it done, but we also want to get it done the correct way.
I think a lot of important issues were brought up, whether it's talking about the quality of the workmanship or the longevity of the proposed projects. But I know a lot of times in our community, people talk at Maywoodians, but a lot of times don't listen. So I created a segment called Maywoodians Speak in order to hear from the people. So as I take you guys on a ride to actually look at these alleyways, I stopped and had an opportunity to speak to about 4 or 5 different Maywood residents to get their opinions on what they feel about the new alleys. So that being said, I'm going to take you guys on a ride with me. All right, let's roll. So as I headed out, I bumped into a gentleman who was out walking his dog to kind of ask him what he felt about his alleys. And here's what he had to say. How are you experiencing any flooding or any issues with the alleys, the new ones?
I haven't, and I'm gonna tell you something. I've been out here for about 10 years or something like that, 10, 12 years. This is the best we done ever had.
Okay.
It was dirt before that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got some other stuff down there. It was dirt. It was real bad.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't even think we're gonna get any better than this.
Yeah, hopefully it will. Hopefully we will. But I'm just checking on people because certain people aren't having the best experiences. So I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm lucky we got this. I'm very excited just to have this and all the dirt mud I've been through out here.
All right. You have a great day.
All right.
I think that's the special thing about us as Maywoodians. Even in the face of adversity, we're hopeful and we're thankful, even when possibly being presented with things that aren't necessarily to the level of what we deserve. So, what the gentleman stated, I'd heard that spoken a million times that, they were thankful. It may be better than what we potentially had, but the question is what we were given of a good quality of workmanship, and ultimately is it going to have longevity. So before we can get into that, we first need to understand the different components and parts that make up a successful alleyway. To keep things short and brief, we're primarily just going to focus on the drainage system for an alley. And the reason why is ultimately, if an alley is going to be successful, how water is treated as far as moving it away from the alley itself is imperative. So usually an alley system will have a drainage system. If not, potentially it will utilize components of gravity in order to help water move. So in this diagram, you'll see to the left something called pitch. And pitch basically is a slope that causes water to move down that gradient. So an example, if you had a porch, you don't want the porch to not have any pitch or to be flat because water would just pool on the porch after it rains. So usually a porch will have a slight depression or decline so that water can roll down off of the porch. Well, that's the same kind of thing and component that we want our alleyways to have. We want it to move down, away, and specifically away from the structure. structure. Just like on your house, if you look to the right of the diagram, that's why we have gutters that sometimes have an extension on, because not only do we want the water to come down off of the roof that's pitched, towards the ground, but we also want the water to move away from the house so it doesn't just sit up against the foundation, because that's when we start to get water in our basement and a lot of bad things start to happen. So what you'll see is the apron, which is higher than the actual driveway, and due to gravity, it's going to pull the water down away from the garage and down, to wherever the driveway actually ends. However, when water does not remain off of the asphalt and it's allowed to sit, then you get the signs of deterioration where you can get raveling, where the actual binder that holds the alleyway together starts to break down and you start to see the gravel come through. Or you can basically get a changing of the colors from black to a grayish color. And then you can also get a situation where you develop cracks in the actual asphalt itself. Those are all signs that water has infiltrated and that the alley is basically breaking down. So let's see how the actual alleys are handling the flow of water without an actual drainage system in place. And this is a prime example. Now, mind you, it rained 3 days ago. 3 days ago. Today is Thursday. 3 days ago. What do you think this is going to do to the property? Like, I want to actually get out and show you this mess, right? So once again, a couple of things I want to point out to you. Like I said, they indiscriminately decided which garages to go all the way up to. Why wouldn't you go all the way up to this person's garage? If you look at the property next door, they did it for them, but you didn't. So this is somebody right now. If you just look at the alley, there's a major drop off in from the driveway to the actual alley. I mean, look at that. And then just to go ahead, and I'm gonna go ahead and take this camera off so you can purely see. I want you to see the big height difference. So can you understand? Look at how it pitches. This driveway, like I said, it pitches down. So you're going to pitch the water onto the asphalt, right? But because, there is a difference in the height of the apron, look at how deep this is. That has to be about 2 to 3 inches of just standing water. So this person is going to continually get water, and it's going to continue to eat away at what's left of their driveway. This is a patch job that probably was added on later. Once again, I don't know who in the administration these people done pissed off, but look at this. Prime example. On the right side, they took it up to the apron, and then on the left side, even if people had an apron, they just left it. They just left it. Which makes the comments that I hear residents making that they ran out of gravel, or they only wanted to put forth a certain amount of money. But look at this. So for this person, of course, who doesn't have the asphalt, you have a situation where, look at this, standing water. Now can you imagine what's going to happen if it rains and then it freezes later in the wintertime? These people, when they're backing out, they're going to have to back out over ice. And like I said, the way that it's been done, that there's no rhyme and reason for how, they selected certain properties to take it all the way to their garage. And then other properties, they just haphazardly, didn't do it thoroughly. I mean, it's a hot mess, 100% hot mess. Pitch all that water onto the asphalt, right? But if you just go down a little bit further, okay, so that's pitched the correct way. is not really going to be pitched that well, because if you can see, it's almost as though it dips down and then the asphalt goes back up, okay? And if I need to get out the car, I will. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily go straight down. It goes down, but then it goes back up. Okay, so that's going to be a problem. So all the water is going to pool right there in the middle of this person's driveway, okay, or the apron. And then you have certain other ones. So this one, it comes down, and I'll try and draw it on the video, and then it goes back up, you know? So it's the same thing. But then you go a few houses down where you have that up and down, and now this one, once again, just drains straight onto the pavement. Straight onto the pavement. And you can even see that's how it drains, because right here, now you can see, like I said, it rained about 2 or 3 days ago. You can see that the pavement or the asphalt is still wet. It's still wet. Which shows you how this particular driveway is draining. But if you come back to these properties here, if you notice that it's not really wet. So the question is, where is all that water gone? Where is all that water gone? Well, that's a good question. Where did the water go? You know? It most likely went underneath, you know, the surface of this alley. Right? But this is a prime example. You can clearly see how the water is draining. You know, this water is eventually going to drain down, and it's going to meet up with the actual sewer system eventually. But that shows like the quality of workmanship here. You can see from property to property that they were put in differently. Now, for the property that you're about to see, I had a chance to speak to the homeowner, and he told me that since the alleyways had recently been done, he's been having flooding. He said that prior to that being done, he didn't really have major issues, but now with the new asphalt, he gets this accumulation of water in his backyard and then potentially in his basement. And the problem with the alley here is that if you look down there, you know, the alley pitches down towards me on that side. And then if you look down here, it's the same thing. So he gets water, or both of the neighbors, because this is a neighbor's yard, and you can see that the water just here is still, the pavement's still wet. And then behind his garage is still wet. So for all intents and purposes, the water just pools because you have water, the asphalt pavement is pitched from both sides right down to this area. So they're always going to get water, a pooling of water. Another potential issue is the intersection between where the alleyway meets the actual roadway. And then here is another problem. I want you to look at what I'm about to have to deal with. Look at the difference in the height of this, you know, entrance into the street. I'll back up just so you can see. This is why planning for projects like this is totally necessary. Why wouldn't you make sure that the driveway ties into the road better? You know, this is really bad. I mean, I don't think the cameras are going to do it justice, but there's a big gully here. on Harrison Street between 2nd and 5th Avenue, the actual quality of the transitions in that area is mind blowing. And just more of the same was noted on streets just off of Harrison. So now let's hear from the mayor on his thoughts about this repaving project, and then I'll give you my final thoughts.
Appreciate you wanting the village manager to answer, trustee. But realistically, when we have the conversation about the alleys, we've been talking about alleys, well, the village of Maywood has been talking about the rec alleys for decades, right? So we already know from assessments that Hancock has given us, each alley to do the drainage and the cement is $250,000 per alley. So when we're thinking about $250,000 per alley, that comes with a price tag of over $25 million to get every alley done in the village of Maywood. What GA Paving has been able to do with the asphalt is eliminating the fact of the first thing that our building and code department Public Works department tried to do was we purchased the grading machine. So in the grading machine, they would go through the alleys and go through the rocks in hopes that it would flatten out. But after 3 or 4 rains, the same potholes were right back where they were before. So that was what the problem is. When you think about from the village of Maywood, the goal right now was to handle alleys, because everyone consistently talks about the alleys. So while we are still putting together funding requests for the infrastructure bill.
So now let me give you my thoughts. But first of all, I need to correct some information. The mayor said that in order to do all the remaining 63 alleyways, it would cost primarily about $25 million. But when you do the math, it's actually more like $16 million. If you think about the amount of money that allegedly we potentially paid, it's bumping pretty much $1 million for the route that we decided to take with the asphalt alleyways. And the plan is to try and wait for additional grant money and funding, but I believe that the village had money in which they could have acquired additional green alleyways in the interim. For example, pretty much just a month after that August meeting, the village board passed the increase in their own salaries. That adds hundreds of thousands of dollars to the budget over years that could have been used to get people cement alleyways. In addition to that, from buying cars and upgrades on travel, the village has spent a lot of money paying for things that are not a necessity, that's not infrastructure. So Maywood has money, and it would have been a better investment to have determined whether or not we could have gotten more green or concrete alleyways that are going to be more long lasting, and then figured out ways to supplement it to do a better job at repaving the asphalt alleyways, with the understanding that the goal after that should have been to save up money so that when the asphalt alleyways started giving away, we could just turn them over with green alleyways. That would have been a better plan, based on my opinion. Which leads us to where we are. Roughly a year later, we have alleys that are already failing, that are in a state of disrepair. We have alleys that are potentially causing damage to our roadways, and then also causing damage to residents' housing or garages. So the question is, due to the poor quality of workmanship, ultimately what's going to be the final cost? Because there have been instances based on the asphalt not being installed properly where residents have had to complain, and then the paving company has had to come out and extend the aprons. So we're spending additional monies because it wasn't done correctly. I know that some people have even alleged that it was done so rapidly in order to get it out in front of the last election, but ultimately we as taxpayers are going to pay the cost when leadership decides, instead of going for quality, they instead decide to go for quantity. Then we end up paying the cost in the end. So either you're going to pay the cost on the front end, or in our situation with these alleyways, we're going to pay the cost of it in the back end. That being said, I thank you guys for tuning in. I hope this was very informative. I really encourage everybody to go back and actually go to the website to actually see the board meetings in totality, so that you can get a firm understanding of the context of the discussion that was had about the alleyways. That being said, I'm Claudia from the Maywood Watchdog. You guys have a great day. Bye.